Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for another MassMedic webinar. Today, we're talking about realizing safe, intuitive user interfaces and key considerations for regulated medical devices. I'm pleased to present this webinar today from MedAcuity Software. If you haven't met me, I'm Anna King, a marketing coordinator at MassMedic. And if you're not familiar with our organization, we're a membership-based trade association for the medical device industry. We work to promote our ecosystem in New England through connection, education, events like this, advocacy, and awareness. I do have a quick housekeeping note before I turn it over to our presenters. This webinar is being recorded, so all registrants will receive the recording after the presentation, along with a copy of the slides. We're also allocating some time for a Q&A, so please make sure to put your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Now I'm pleased to introduce Michelle Wu, Fractional COO and Medical Device Development Consultant for Wu Consulting. Michelle is a senior leader with 20 years of experience in the medical device and life sciences industries. She's had roles in executive leadership, product and process development, manufacturing, and quality. And in her current role, she's designed to help startups bring their medical device innovations to life. So thank you so much for being here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Thanks, Anna. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. And this topic is really important. We know that having an effective and safe medical devices as we're developing is important for a variety of reasons that the panelists that we'll cover today. And before we start, I'd love to introduce our panelists. We've got a great group of folks with a variety of backgrounds to give different perspectives for today. So first off, Margot Boyaval. She is currently UX UI director at Teva Pharmaceuticals. She heads the design team there and is responsible for the launch of DigiHaler, an integrated inhaler system for asthma management. Prior to that, Margot led Amgen's commercial innovation oncology and global customer experience teams to develop the first in-house self-injection system for a range of Amgen biologics. And previously at Zymedica, now Veranex, she directed client programs with internal innovation teams from initial product conceptualization through realization. She's had over 20 years in her career and has been awarded over 30 design and functional patents. Next, Dr. Bruce Johnson, representing our development side of things and perspective. He has over 25 years of experience designing and developing complex software systems and over 15 years experience working in regulated medical software development. A lot of his experience has been focused on UI design and human factors aspects of Class 2 and Class 3 medical device programs. Most recently, Bruce has been providing strategic insight to a variety of clients on the intersection of modern software development methodologies, including HF usability and agile practices, and in the regulated medical environment. And last but not least, bringing our regulatory perspective today is Mary McNamara Cullinane. She is currently Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at ClearPoint Neuro. With over 25 years of regulatory experience in the medical device, diagnostics, and biotech industries, she successfully authored over 175 510Ks and responses, PMAs, de novo submissions, breakthrough device designations, and been responsible for several clinical trials. In addition, she formed successful regulatory strategies through her strong regulatory knowledge of global regulatory practices and registrations in Europe, Korea, and Australia, and has worked on many technical files and CERs. So as you see, a wide breadth of experience and perspectives that we'll bring today. What we're going to do in the first few minutes here, we have a few slides of key points and overview from each of our panelists. And next we'll then go into a Q&A with the panelists here that I'll moderate to share and illuminate with examples a lot of the practices that we're seeing on how usability and how important it is to bring in and consider that safe user interface design. And as Anna mentioned, we'll leave a few minutes at the end for questions for this panel, myself and this panel, at the end of the program. So I will turn it next, first over for our slides to Mary. You're first.
Thank you, Michelle. And good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to give you, as Michelle indicated, a regulatory perspective on human factors and in relation to designing safe, intuitive user interfaces and what we need to do from that regulatory perspective. So FDA has recently published a guidance just about a month ago in December. And that guidance document provides us with a clear framework for the kinds of information that are required in marketing submissions. So what kind of human factors information is required in those submissions? And what we need to do there is follow decision trees to determine what that information is. And then the second guidance document that I urge everybody to follow very carefully in conjunction with the most recent one is the 2016 guidance document, which really gives us a how-to on how to perform human factors evaluations, how to identify those critical tasks, users, user interfaces, and environments. So the first document provides you with a framework of what is needed in a marketing submission. The second guidance document will tell you the types of testing and human factors engineering analyses that are required. But again, urge you to use both of these documents. My second slide goes into a little bit more detail of the for the first guidance document, the most recently published one. So again, this document provides that clear framework for the kinds of information needed. And what you'll need to do is follow flowcharts and a series of questions. And those questions are based on the risks of your product and what kinds of modifications are being made, or what critical tasks are relevant to your new device. So the categories are 1, 2, and 3, with 3 being the most risky category. So I'll just quickly go through. The first category would be for an existing device modification with no changes to the user interface, users, or use environments. So basically what would be required here is simply a statement, right? A statement in your marketing submission that you have reviewed this information, followed FDA's decision tree, and providing a statement in your document. The second category would be a new device with no critical tasks or modifications made to an existing device. But again, there's no critical tasks associated with either the new device or the modified device. And then lastly, any new devices with that include critical tasks or modifications to an existing device that add critical tasks will require the full human factors engineering analysis and report. And one last thing, a couple of examples. The first example for category 1 might be addition of new cybersecurity measures that wouldn't affect critical tasks. An example for category 2 would be to have a further description or labeling in your associated with your device or your system. And that would require a rationale. And then category 3 would be devices that have major critical tasks or modifications to devices that add critical tasks to that. So that is it. I'm going to be here, as Michelle said, for questions, and thank you for listening.
Hi, everyone. My name is Margot Boyavel. Thanks for the introduction, Michelle, and also happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation. I also wanted to share a couple slides just to kind of give some context. My background is in design, and I thought from a design perspective, really when you start out to design a successful UI design, what are some things that will help you along the way? So I've got actually here 6 tips on how to do that. So first, really thinking about what Mary is saying is know the regulations you're designing into at the beginning. This might seem like a constraint for your design process, but honestly, if you kind of know where your guardrails are, where you can be creative, it's really going to help you be more successful in terms of creating a UI that both meets users' needs, but also meets the regulatory needs. So I really encourage you to get cozy with your regulatory partner or find one that you can get cozy with and really share and create a partnership with them. So discuss the design often and early and continuously so that you are aligned and you stay aligned. There's a lot of changes pretty regularly to what the regulations are. And they're your best partner to know what those are and how to make sure you're setting yourself up for design success. Secondly is really don't make assumptions about your users. So a lot of times the design process will start with like, okay, what is the goal for the organization or the business? We think that our users or patients or clinicians act like this and want these things. I would say stop right there and say, let's actually talk to them and find out what they need, what they think, what's important to them, and then align it with your business goals and make sure that there's a fit. This Mary, I'm sure will agree with, is do a risk analysis early. She mentioned the URRA, but even before you get into that level of potential formality, you can do a risk analysis very informally, just really starting to talk and have a dialogue about where potential areas of risk are. It will help also create some design perspective and bounds and help you focus on what might need extra thought or input. Fourth is do pre-formative and formative testing with your key users. So make sure you include all your users, do it early, do it often. And here I included the pre-formative, which is sometimes known as just user research or market research. Don't just rely on your KOLs. Really get out there and talk with people. It will help your testing process. And I know we'll talk a little bit more of that later. And then really work with development as well. Don't throw your design or your design intent over the wall. We really want to create a partnership with your dev lead to make sure that your intent is understood. And there's going to be things that come up that you'll need to change. And you really want to have a good open communication with your dev partner. And then lastly, is be the voice of your users throughout the process. Oftentimes, when you get caught up in details or you're working on documentation, you forget, to go back to what the users need. And often design is a representative for the users and what they're aiming to achieve through a solution. So you can go to the next. Thanks. And then just a couple, if you want to do some reading, I always suggest to read HE 75. It's really a standard for design principles when you're designing medical devices. I pulled a few of the topics that are in HE 75 here. You can see it's really relevant to today's conversation about optimizing user interactions, confirming important actions, designing to prevent user confusion. So there's a lot of good material in there, even if you just look at what's in the contents, it can really start to spark ideas and think about it. But this is a great guidance document if you have never designed medical devices before and really want to know more. A lot of great minds gave input to this. And then lastly, I would say define and share your design process. So really define the problem that you're solving for users and the business, prioritize those user needs, create and test concepts with your users iteratively, and then collaborate with development to implement the design and then continue to do testing so that you eliminate and mitigate risk as you go. So I'll turn it over to Bruce.
Excuse me. Thanks, Margot. I just want to touch on a couple of key considerations from the development perspective. First off is really to understand your timeline and work to a timeline. And here, when we're talking about user interface designs and human factors studies and things like that, the key is to iterate on those designs early, using mock-ups, prototypes, things like that. And you really want to get a lot of ideas out there and get them vetted, get your user input, and arrive at a fairly stable design. I'll throw out sort of the 80% rule, right? You want to get 80% of the way there before you really start committing and implementing that, because really, once you start implementing things in software, and mechanical designs and hardware, and you start committing those design ideas, little changes start to take on disproportionately large costs when they're made late in the process. It's very easy to iterate on a design, but at some point, when you start committing resources, you really need to understand those changes and work with them. Excuse me. That kind of leads to the second key consideration, is that regulatory environment. The sort of the roadmap that Mary talked about, that really takes you through that process. It's important to understand that that's not a process delivered from Mars. That is something that's been developed based on the industry best practices over a lot of devices and a lot of years. So it's really important to try and extract the value from that process, right? It's not really just a burden on your development process. When you get to that point where you're ready to start committing resources, it's important to understand your design control requirements. Iteration is great; it gets lots of ideas out there. But at a point where you're going to start committing resources, you definitely want to start thinking about how you're going to do your design controls, how you're going to understand the impact of changes from that point on. You want to have that baseline from which you can say, yeah, that's a great idea. What's the impact of that? How is that going to affect our timeline? How's that going to affect our costs? And finally, on the regulatory point, is really that if you push all this off, right? And I've worked with a lot of organizations that consider this as sort of an at the end task, a documentation task. Get everything ready for your submission. That kind of what we call process debt really is taking all that value that was in that best practice and turning it into just a cost at the end. You've really lost that opportunity to get that input into the design process, to iterate on the things that you're doing. So next, the last kind of thing I want to talk about really is something that Margot touched on, is really the value of collaboration between the teams. For me, it's the collaboration between the development organization and the design team, but it really extends across the board. Mary talked earlier about collaboration with the regular or getting cozy with your regulatory team. That really brings an efficiency to the process, where if you have that mindset of continual collaboration, you really can start to arrive at an optimal solution. And it's important there to remember that optimal doesn't mean the best solution for one stakeholder, right? Optimization is the process of maximizing the value across a lot of different variables. So it's really a process of extracting the value from that process to really arrive at that optimal solution. And the thing that really drives that is that synergy you get from that collaboration. Different perspectives really bring together more than just the individuals. It's that the team can really have that synergy that brings more to the conversation and brings more efficiency to process. And it really helps you to kind of navigate that fine line between the sort of the pragmatic aspects of time to market and costs and schedules, but allows you to incorporate that innovation and thinking that's going to really let you produce a market leading design, something that's really innovative. And that synergy really helps you foster that sort of when issues arise, because they will arise, you want that reaction to be a what if we did this? How would that solve the problem? And what you get when you have that over the wall approach is the knee-jerk reaction is often, oh, we can't do that. That's too complicated. That's gonna blow out of cost. That can't be done. And at that point, you're dead in the water, right? There's no place to go. What you want is that, hey, that's great, but what if we put this over here? Does that affect the usability? Because if it doesn't, man, that would save us a lot of development time. If we could restructure that. And that's the kind of synergy that I think the collaboration really brings to the picture. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Michelle, and we can get our discussion going. So thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. And thanks to you, Mary and Margot, for sharing your thoughts from all those development, regulatory, and design perspectives. And the key takeaways that we want to make sure all of you in the audience are hearing and taking away from today. One, definitely including users and throughout the process, so you can identify issues early before it's expensive at the end to try and mitigate. from a design perspective, developing and following that design process and collaborating with regulatory will definitely save you time and get you a better solution. 3, extract your value from your regulatory guidance. Counterintuitively, it actually helps foster some brainstorming and thoughts when you have constraints. I see Marco's shaking her head. She knows what I'm talking about. Obviously, collaborate between design, development, regulatory. You get efficiency, synergy, and better devices. Again, from the regulatory perspective, use those guidances. Use them as to help you, not viewing them as a hindrance. And last one, definitely don't wait until what you think you have the final device design to follow the guidances and get your user feedback and such. You will save a lot of money and time. So key takeaways there. All right, now let's shift over to our panel discussion, where we have are aiming to share our experiences and give you more examples, both from ways we've seen things go right as you incorporate human factors design and usability, and also examples of where it goes wrong, and also to some practical tips you can use in your organization as you're developing your medical device. So it came up a few times in terms of if you're proactive and helping to identify issues early, that can save you a lot of time. And I'd like to spend a few moments sharing experiences where you were able to identify problems early. So give an example of something you discovered through formative testing that might have been a problem later. Margot, you talked about, maybe you can give an example, because you talked about the value of using that formative or even pre-formative testing.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. You know, I think people are often resistant to sort of doing testing because it feels like you're stopping and you're adding a lot of time. But I will say, example that I can share is actually on a wearable medical device injection system, where we were worried about the wearability of the device over a day's period. And what we did early on was get the size, weight, and dimensions of this device that was going to be worn on the body, pulled together, I think it was like 40 people to actually wear it for 24 hours and see what happened. You know, did it fall off? Did it get bumped? Were people able to go about their daily lives wearing this and just really learn, is this device going to be wearable? And what we found was that the height of it off the body was causing only a few people, but a significant percentage when you think about the population that we were testing with, causing it to get knocked off or bumped. So it allowed us really early on to kind of go back to the drawing board and say, okay, how can we rearrange what we think this device is going to be to minimize the height and keep it closer to the body. So really early on, just a block model, we were able to identify an issue and you know, change the whole trajectory of the design and the engineering of it. So for me, that was a great lesson in just the value of testing something as early as possible.
That's a great example. I can definitely imagine if you had found that at the end when your engineering is quote unquote finalized, and then at that point you've spent all this development money, and
Yes.
it's what do you do? And Margo and I used to be colleagues at Medica, now Veranex, and I remember when a lot of the guidance first was coming out on human factors, had a number of clients that came to us when they were ready to submit or had gotten feedback from the FDA saying you need to do human factors, and we would do the testing for them, and it was very awkward conversations because it was obvious that it wasn't going to meet the expectations for human factors, and there was going to be a lot of time and effort on how to rectify that. So Mary, we were talking about an example where another concrete example of finding human factors usability issues at the end. And you had a great example. Could you share that?
Sure. So I was involved with also a wearable glucose sensor product that was placed on the arm, and then a handheld device abraded the skin to place the sensor. But what we found towards the end of the process, because they did not incorporate human factors analysis at all, was that people that were left-handed had a very difficult time placing the sensor as well as using the handheld device. So what happened is we had to go back and the engineers had to redesign this device for left-handed users. And this is something that, had we taken it into account early on, followed any of the ISO or FDA guidance documents, we would have determined early on that this was going to be an issue and incorporated it into our design.
Yeah, definitely making sure you're incorporating your different user groups. So in this case, right-handed users and left-handed users. And that must have been a difficult point for the company at that point to decide what to do. So
yes,
great examples of where you can identify issues early, and also what happens if you don't. So I'd like to move on to talking about collaboration. And Bruce, maybe you can start, because you highlighted a lot about collaboration across the disciplines, regulatory, design. And could you give an example of how you saw collaboration between the design team and other stakeholders, how that helped and influenced the UI and usability design process?
Sure. The main example that pops to mind is not too long ago, I worked on a large medical device system, dozens of screens, multiple workflows. And when the development team first got, the early design sketches, we were using a tool called Figma. When we first saw those designs and started to think about how we were going to implement them and how we were going to architect the system to support that, what we saw was there was a lot of subtle differences between the screens that was really complicating our ability to design components for reuse and drive efficiency through the implementation process. What we did, though, was we went back to the design team. We worked with the design team to really understand the intent behind those subtle differences. Did they affect the usability? Were they there as mitigations for use error issues? And really tried to understand and communicate back the impact of those variations of those screens had on the development process. And what we discovered through that process of close collaboration, sitting in a room together, going through these screens, is really understood that the intent, there was not really an intent behind those variations that we saw on the development side as big impediments to an efficient implementation. So what we were able to do was we were able to work with the design team to really optimize the layout of those and the components in those screens, so that we had things like common headers that we could reuse across screens, and really boil it down to a handful of screen variants so that we could implement 4, 5, 6 basic screen types, and then through configuration of those types produce all the screens in the system. If we hadn't done that, we would have developed 35 bespoke screens at a huge cost. But through that collaborative effort, we were able to really bring some efficiency to that process and really get it down to a handful of screen variants, and a much easier, much more maintainable and extensible architecture as well out of the deal. So
35 screens down to just a handful. That's amazing.
And to be clear, it's still 35 screens to the user. We weren't changing the workflows. We were just making the implementation of it much more efficient. So that's where that collaboration really came into play. So.
Yeah, that's a great example. Really understanding, does this engineering design or difference, does it really matter to the user from a usability and risk perspective? And I love that example. Mary, can you give your perspective on how you like to see the regulatory group and yourself as the RA member participate in that collaboration?
Sure, absolutely. So the regulatory group really should be involved at very early stages of development so that we can provide the FDA perspective, the human factors engineering analysis from the FDA perspective, as well as the ISO guidance documents. Anything that you're going to do can be refined and optimized based on using that information, using that data framework, decision trees that FDA has provided now with this most recent guidance document. It will, as my last example showed, that going back to redesign your device after you feel like it's fully designed and you're in design freeze, is going to cost a lot of money and take a lot of time. So by, again, getting the regulatory staff involved, human factors staff or human factors consulting groups involved early on will, again, refine that process and save you significant time and money in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. I am often advising my clients to make sure they understand the regulatory strategy and reaching out when they want to change claims or navigating which claims they want to do and how does that affect what they need to show.
Right. And also, I mean, just by streamlining the process, you're going to minimize user error, the environment, identify your users, your critical tasks, and again, which you need to know upfront or at least early on in your development before you're moving on to design freeze.
Margot, I'm sure that hits home for you. Maybe you can share an example how you see collaboration really being a benefit at this point.
Yeah, I think, when you're working on regulated medical devices in the world that I'm in now, or also add in drug and drug delivery and connected devices to that, there aren't a lot of real world examples to look to. So really that close collaboration and I'd say seeking the understanding from legal, privacy, compliance, regulatory, even development, as Bruce mentioned, it's critical because all your stakeholders are going to influence your design in one way or the other. And by talking with these partners and helping them understand, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve for our end user and the business objective, right? And then, okay, what is the sandbox that we can play in? And what are we able to do and what are we not able to do? And having that like healthy tension, that push and pull creates a better end solution. And it also helps everyone who's working on this product know along the way why we have the design that we have. And there's no surprises at the end for like, oh, there's a privacy concern with sharing this data, showing patients on this screen this sort of information, or how they're going to share it with their clinician. It's all woven into the design process so that there aren't these big surprises at the end of like, oh no, now we have to go and rework everything because we really didn't understand the legal constraints or the regulatory constraints. So I see, I kind of had an aha moment early on when we started in when I worked in med device exclusively, that I was like very resistant to we have this very rigid, felt like a very rigid, documented process for how we even needed to do early design work. But then I realized it is the design process. And that was a big aha moment for me. And then I'd sort of changed my perspective. Instead of being resistant to all these stakeholders who feel like they're coming with rules and saying, you can't do this, as Bruce pointed out, it turned into like, okay, how can we collaborate to understand each other? And it goes both sides. The design team has to sort of understand enough about where regulatory, legal, privacy, compliance are coming from, and vice versa. Your partners need to know what you're trying to achieve for your users through the design. And I think that creates a really great dynamic if you can achieve that. And it's scary sometimes. You're like, I really don't want to talk to the lawyers, but when you do, you realize like, okay, this is a really important design input, and it helps you be creative and create solutions that are successful at the end.
That's great. On that, from the practical side, on the collaboration, what are some ways and maybe tools and tricks that you use to ensure that that design intent on the UI is best communicated throughout the group? Bruce, you mentioned a couple tools you had. Maybe you can share some more examples of how you guys stay connected.
Yeah, in that example I was talking about, the integrated tool suite was sort of key to that whole interactive discussion, right? We were both looking, even virtually, we were both looking at the same design artifacts, if you will, in that tool. And that, again, that was Figma, but I've also used Miro boards and other tools. They're very, very similar sort of real-time collaborative tools that really let you work with something that you can point to, right? And say, no, I'm talking about this here. And what we've found, what I've found over the years is when ideas get translated into words, into a design specification or something like that, something's lost, right? Some of that intent is lost. It's like a game of telephone, right? You're taking the ideas into words, and then the development team's trying to turn those words back into different ideas. Those cross-functional working sessions really are a much more efficient way to communicate both directions, really, the intent and the impact of decisions. Misunderstandings are always going to happen between different teams, but the key here is really to identify them early, right? To see them early, to be able to talk about them in essentially real time, to come up with a solution for them. I don't want to discount these sort of as you get past sort of this ideation phase and into the development phase, you still want to produce your design artifacts. They're key to the process. They're your baseline for change assessment. But early on, you definitely want to have that cross-functional team working with a common set of tools. And that I can't emphasize that enough. The understanding, having a common understanding of the tool set gets the tools out of the way of a common understanding of the design. So.
Great. What about you, Margot, in your organization? What do you use day to day?
Yeah, so I would definitely echo what Bruce is saying. I mean, there's lots of tools out there. We happen to use Sketch for really early concepting and Zeppelin to share the design, but Figma's a parallel to that. But the only thing that I would really add to what Bruce was saying is, I think design sometimes gets into this like, oh, I'm going to go off and I'm going to just, and I'll come back to you when it's perfect, or I feel like it's perfect or really ready. And I think decoupling that and sort of creating really rough, just like put it on a screen. If you're doing it, a user interface, like put it down, do a sketch. It doesn't, just so that you can start to close the gap with people's understanding. Like Bruce is saying, like you write a design spec in words, but when you see it, it's like, oh, okay, this is what you're trying to achieve. I understand it better. And it really just helps drive the conversation. So don't be too precious about like, oh no, I want to wait till I have everything, the colors right and the sizes right and the alignment. It's like, no, what are you philosophically trying to communicate? How can you create really quick visual of that to have the conversation? And then you can go back and, make sure that the button size is right and the spacing is what you want it to be. But I think that just not being too precious about it is a really great way to bring people in, because then they can also see, oh, it's not like finished. I can add my comments to this and feel like I'm contributing, and not, create an issue for the design team, who spent hours and hours on this. So do it early, do it rough, and, ask good questions and share it. You'll learn a lot.
That's great. There's different levels of prototypes for all different parts of the process, right?
Absolutely.
So that's great. I'd love to share too and go to talking more about just benefits of human factors in user design beyond just, obviously, we heard the emphasis on regulatory compliance and to design a safe medical device. Wondering what additional benefits you see for your devices that you're developing that as part of incorporating human factors and user-centric design into your medical device. So Mary, do you want to start and take
Sure.
this one?
Sure. So, as I mentioned several times, following that FDA guidance is critical to designing safe devices, software, and systems. So additional benefits is basically uncovering use-related errors, right? Or environmental related errors. You want to uncover those early in your process before you're in the field. The last thing you want is the misuse, serious injury, malfunction, and sometimes even death. You want to uncover it and not have your users uncover it or have FDA uncover it. So again, following these guidance documents that are risk related, which is related to the level of critical tasks that are part of your system or your device or your software, is really critical to ensuring that you don't uncover those issues later on in the field.
What about you, Bruce? What do you see as another benefit beyond just compliance?
It comes down, to me, it comes down to having those different perspectives really bring tangible benefits to the process. Somebody mentioned earlier on about always going back directly to your users. Don't depend on sort of perceived understanding of what users want. A lot of times that's not really what they're going to want. A case in point, I worked on a system where there was a particular display of lots of data, and it had sort of summary data and had detailed data. And it turned out when those early screens were taken to their formatives or even pre-formatives to vet ideas with the clinicians, what we found out was that relative positions of that data were important. It wasn't just a screen full of data. There was a mental model that the clinicians had that flowed through that data. And so the early designs actually had that inverted, and they were impeding the clinical thought process rather than augmenting it. By getting that feedback back early through that sort of human factors analysis, understanding that the user perspective directly, really saved that program a lot of effort. And late changes, again, there's that mantra, right? Late changes are expensive, and discovering that very early on really helped align that design with the clinician's mental model of how that data should be perceived.
Certainly, the more you can align to a clinician's mental model, like you're saying, Bruce, can lead to faster adoption, right? They don't have to relearn a whole new way of or order of doing their procedure, for sure. What about you, Margot? What additional benefits do you see beyond just regulatory compliance?
Yeah, and I kind of mentioned this earlier. I mean, to me, it's really when you understand what you're designing into, it becomes part of your process of understanding your constraints. And when you identify potential issues early, you can make better decisions as you go forward. So you can check to make sure that the user needs that you've identified and prioritized are the needs that you are meeting, if you're meeting them fully or partially. So to Bruce's example, probably understood that this was the type of data that was going to be important to the clinicians, but they didn't realize that the order of that mattered. So probably early on, they found, okay, these are the pieces of information they need to make a clinical decision or, do the clinical practice. But, going back to those users and learning from them, to me, it really is part of a good design practice, testing and learning iteratively. Then when you get to your last formative or your summative, you actually go into it pretty confident, that you're going to do well, because you've actually eliminated the risk through iterative design and development process.
That's great. Yes, you should not be going into summative testing, not knowing, not being fairly confident.
Don't want surprises
for
then,
sure.
yeah.
We have one more time for one more question before we go into the take audience questions. And I want to shift to talking about, folks here are hearing all about the many reasons why and how to incorporate human factors and usability into their design process. What's your advice on how to integrate that into for audience members, their organization, or in their product development as their, what advice do you have? And Margot, I'll have you start.
Sure. Yeah, I think first is understand your organization and kind of where it's at. Who do you need to align with? And where are they at in the thinking about this kind of testing? And sometimes a lot of the work that needs to be done is education within your organization about, like seminars, where it's like, this is why it's important. This is, who may need to know that it's important, so that you get the support that you need to kind of do the work that needs to be done early. And then really build a case to try it out. Sometimes you shouldn't just go for it on like the biggest or, most important project. If your organization's really not sure that this is the best approach, my recommendation is start on something small. Do this process where you're integrating users and testing on something that shows the results and shows the benefits of it, and then you can share that success more broadly within the organization. It also depends on the scale of your organization, but if you keep doing that and then people see the value, they'll start to support your approach. And realize that proactive approach can really save you a lot of time and stress later. So my advice is really think of a way that you can integrate it if your organization feels resistant to it, and show a success and show the benefit through, maybe it's even prior work that you did, but certainly maybe something that you're working on now.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly, sort of building the case for the return on investment that you get from this kind of collaborative process, and using the regulatory process to your advantage. Really putting things in terms of reduced risks, efficiency, less rework, can really help get the kind of top down support in an organization that you need to really roll this kind of approach out, because you really do need to have a buy-in from the entire organization to really effectively implement this kind of close collaboration.
Right. And I was just going to mention, and I want to sound like a broken record, but following that FDA guidance is so important. But also make sure that the company has an understanding that following these guidance documents does not necessarily mean you have to do complex usability human factors testing. The most recent guidance provides a categorization for you to follow, so you can determine what is needed and then what is needed for your marketing submission. So again, my advice is always follow that guidance, make sure you're familiar with those FDA guidance documents, but make sure it's relevant to what your device, your software, or your system is doing. Use the risk-based approach as described in that guidance document, and it will be a clear pathway. It's an effective, these are effective mechanisms for which you can use to determine your pathway, your testing, and what is required in your regulatory submissions moving forward.
That's great to point out. It's not a one-size-fits-all on what's exactly necessary.
Thank you
Thanks.
all. What a wonderful discussion we have going. I just wanted to pop on to remind folks to submit their questions to the panel using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll pass it over to them to answer. So right at the bottom of your screen. Thanks.
Hannah, anything up front?
It looks like we do have one, and it says, at what point do you start putting early software implementations in front of users?
That's a tough question, because again, early software implementations can mean a lot of different things. Certainly, when you're getting to a stage where maybe you need some level of workflow or data interaction, you might start doing software prototyping. But you have to be really careful about stepping into that full-blown software development phase too early. You can get a lot done with your users through prototypes, through Margot, I'm sure you have tools you use very effectively to communicate design concepts, rather than, hey, here's a finished piece of software, what do you think? You know, that's not where you want to be at, because then you know, the answer, as we've seen in some of the examples we've talked about, is I don't think that's very good. Now what do you do, right? And so you definitely want to use the sort of path of least resistance to get that user feedback.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like, almost, how can you fake the experience in the quickest, lowest fidelity way to get an answer that you feel like is going to help drive your design forward? So like, we often use like InVision for prototyping. You can't click everything on the screen. We know, like, we're going to make these things like clickable because we want to understand, okay, when we show this, where is someone going to go? Are they going to, you know, find the button, find the thing that we're looking for? But there's no code behind it, right? So if you think about what are you trying to learn, where you are at in the design process, you know, the fidelity can be really low or almost fake, right? Because you're usually in a closed environment where you're either on video or virtual, where you're sharing something. But I would say there's so many design tools out there that you can not really program to act in the way without the investment in the code that goes behind it. So, because no one wants to waste their time. So it's really important to just think of, how can I create something quickly to get some reaction to it.
That's great. Thank you. It looks like we do have another one from Allie. It says, from a design perspective, how did you learn to effectively and efficiently explain your design decisions? And what are the best practices for communicating between disciplines?
Yeah, I can take the first part of that question, which is effectively and efficiently explaining your design decisions. It's tricky. The way I see it is, you are the voice of your users, right? You're the representative for your users. So an easy way to justify your design decisions is to go back to those user needs that you've prioritized and say, we're creating this because we heard this from our users. If you get in a place where you're like, well, it just is because I like it, you're in a real danger zone, right? So it's always figuring out what's the justification. And it could be like, you know, the users want this, or it could just be like, this is how people behave. These are the principles of how people take in information. So you can also share with people in your, organization, these are the best practices for how people receive information. This is what we know about behavior in humans, and then here's what our users are saying that they need and want. So you're not just sort of saying, well, I like it. So I think creating those justifications and having those, it's going to make you a better designer, but it also will help those around you see the value of what you're doing, and then it's not arbitrary. We picked purple because we like purple. I like purple, and you definitely want to avoid that.
Yes, sure. So the second half of that question, sort of that regular collaborative meeting environment is a much more, effective medium for communicating these kind of ideas than the review meeting kind of environment. Yeah. Excuse me. The review meeting is really too late in the process, right? So it's it's a much better dynamic to have the daily stand-up, 15 minutes with everybody on the team, designer, a developer representative, maybe dailies too often, but at least weekly. And that way it's a meeting about the collaboration. It's not a meeting reacting to an issue. It's not a meeting looking at a finished artifact, but it's the purpose is to get that collaboration going, to get those communication channels lubricated and really working as a team. So that's sort of.
Yeah, we established UX and dev weekly pairing sessions where it's just, how are things going? What's cropped up? And it's an hour once a week with the lead UX design and the lead dev. And they just talk about whatever, figure things out, move on. Yeah, it's not a formal review as Bruce is saying. So definitely encourage that or set that up if you can.
Well, thank you, audience, for those that submitted questions. This has been a great panel. I hope everyone's got a lot about how to incorporate and the importance of incorporating human factors and usability into your design process and how collaboration is important. Thank you to Mary McNamara Cullinane, Margot Boyaval, and Bruce Johnston for being panelists here today. And thank you, MassMedic and MediCuity for having this. As we round out, I'd like to go around the panelists one more time. What are your closing thoughts as we go out today? Margot, we'll start with you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I would just say, know your users. They are going to help you from day one to post-launch, and your users are your best design input. So know them, what they need, be an advocate for them, and they will help you design the product that needs to be designed.
Bruce?
Yeah, if I could sum it up as one topic, I'd say really focus on that collaboration between the teams and fostering that collaborative, what if we did this kind of environment and attitude. That's really going to bring some efficiencies and synergies to your process, and really frankly reduce costs. It may seem counterintuitive that you're putting more time into it, but you're actually reducing costs by doing it collaboratively, doing it up front, and ultimately you're coming out of the process with a better device.
And Mary?
Yep. So my advice is to, utilize the most recent FDA guidance document to classify your software device or system, which will determine the types of information that will be required. Use the 2016 FDA guidance document to figure out how exactly to do the testing, how to define your users, your interface, your user environment, and this will streamline your process. And by incorporating this early on, you will save time and money in the long run.
Thank you. And I'll turn it back over to you to close us out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And thank you to the panelists and the MediCuity team for such a wonderful presentation. We cannot put on great educational content like this without your support. So thank you. And to learn more about upcoming MassMedic events, check us out on social media or visit massmedic.com. But with that, thank you everyone for coming and have a wonderful day.